What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to Forward Progress, presented by Fanduel. We are back with another edition of our prop show. Here with him and by my side, I'm Jason Cooper. And listen, today things are going to be looking a little bit different. They're going to be looking a little different throughout the playoffs here for our prop show. Normally, we like to release it Saturday morning. We give out a couple picks quickly in and out. But this time for the playoffs, we want to do something a little bit more interactive. So what we're going to do with this show is we're going to run through each game, talk some specific props with Hitman. And we really want to emphasize the interaction with you guys, the chat. So if you have any questions about any plays that you're thinking about and you want Hitman to see if to give you that nudge over the edge to make that play, please feel free to drop them in the chat below. And yeah, if you're new to the channel, make sure you hit that subscribe button. And if you've been here before, hit that like button before we get into things. Going to start off the top here. Los Angeles Chargers taking on the Houston Texans. Hitman, I have a question for you with the Houston receiver group. They've kind of been a mess all year. They obviously lost Tank Dell a couple weeks ago. They bring in Deontay Johnson. Now, we don't have any lines yet for Deontay Johnson posted, but just curious what you think the role he'll have to play in this game, if he'll have a role, and how that will affect the secondary receivers on Houston.
Well, obviously Nico Collins is locked into his role. It's about John Mechie, Deontay Johnson, Robert Woods, and Xavier Hutchinson. Johnson played, I believe, it was like 37% of the snaps last week, and Houston played all their guys. Like they even played Dalton Schultz for most of the game. It was really just Nico Collins, Joe Mixon, CJ Stroud, and some offensive linemen that they didn't play in that game. So it was kind of hard. I was kind of looking to see if there was any Houston guys like that they sat, which would have given me like a better indication. Like, all right, they value this guy enough, like they valued Nico Collins, not to play him. That didn't happen. I mean, all those guys played in the game. There was some talk about that Deontay Johnson was maybe earned a little bit more work after last week. Obviously, you would think that his trajectory is going to go up, considering it's another week that he learned the playbook. I'd probably say that he's the most talented wide receiver that they have other than Nico Collins. So I'm kind of leaning towards Johnson gets a decent sized role. Now, maybe that goes from like 37% of the snaps to like slightly over 50 or something like that. But I think that he's their second most talented receiver. And I mean, this is a must-win game, obviously. I think it makes sense that they're going to do everything possible to get him out there for as much as they can. So I'm kind of pro Johnson, anti maybe some of the other receivers this week. There's no lines out for Johnson right now, but that's kind of where I think the direction of that of the receivers on Houston is going.
Yeah, and if you just remember back to that Week 17 game with the Houston Texans, like they were really using Nico Collins in that short intermediate role, where it's like you could have probably used them better downfield instead they were using them over the middle. That could be the place where Deontay Johnson thrives. A couple questions in the chat here. Audipal mentions, I know you don't do TD betting much, but he said 10-1 anytime TD. That kind of looks fun, especially if you think there's an increased workload for him compared to previously. It could be a good, interesting.
Yeah, to be honest, like any of the touchdown stuff is going to be subjective for me. Like I don't have in front of me how I would exactly price it. So I have a tough time like just recommending that market. But I like ceiling outcomes with Deontay Johnson in this game because he is a pretty talented player. And if he does get more of a workload, you might want some alternate lines on him because, I mean, there's a chance that he could be underpriced by a decent bit. So I kind of like getting a big payout on a Deontay Johnson prop. So subjectively, I don't hate that.
Yeah, and if you look at the other wide receivers in the market right now, John Mechie plus 470, Xavier Hutchinson plus 700, Robert Woods plus 800, all to score a touchdown. Deontay Johnson being priced a little bit better compared to those guys, and you think he might get more work there. One more question about this game, then we're going to move on to the next game. Gobsmacked asked in the chat, want to play Mechie over receptions here. I believe his line is over 2.5 plus 112 right now on FanDuel, if I can pull it up here. What are your thoughts on that here for Gobsmacked 123?
Mechie is coming in a little banged up with the shoulder. I think that he's fine. Like it shouldn't be much of an issue, but it's always just a little bit concerning on a role player coming into a game with an injury. And then plus you have the Johnson stuff. I mean, I think Mechie will probably be second in line for routes run for Houston, but there is some variance with him. I'd probably stay away at the moment.
Yeah, also just something to maybe monitor live as well. Again, like we don't know exactly the usage for Deontay Johnson here. You've always been a proponent of live betting. Always come on our shows in the fourth quarter and give us some good tips there. But yeah, keep an eye on it live. Maybe that's a better way to attack that game. Let's move on to our next game, though. Baltimore Ravens taking on the Pittsburgh Steelers. And hey, man, I have a question for you about George Pickens. George Pickens obviously missed the most recent game against the Baltimore Ravens, but in week 11, 8 receptions, 89 yards, deep play threat, very strong versus man coverage. And the Ravens give up a ton of explosive plays. They're third most in explosive plays in the passing game. So my question to you is about George Pickens. I want to look towards his overs. I've already played some of his longest reception. And I believe Rob talked about this yesterday. His over 22.5 right now at Fanduel on his longest receptions is minus 138. And his yards are at 55.5, minus 114 both sides. I'm looking towards the over. Are you going to talk me off this one, or are you liking this look here?
I considered the over as well. I lean towards the over. Little bit worried with, first of all, Baltimore's pass defense has gotten a lot better since they moved Kyle Hamilton to safety. Now, a lot of that has been opponent driven as well. They faced a pretty weak strength of schedule of opposing quarterbacks, but this was a defense that earlier in the year was pretty much getting torched by any quarterback that they were playing against. So they have gotten a lot better in pass defense. I do think, like with that line with Pickens, I mean, you are playing it at probably as low as it's been in a long time of Russell Wilson at quarterback. I can't talk you off of it. It's not something that I've bet, but I would call it a lean of mine on the Pickens over. I've been a little worried about, he's kind of been out of it recent weeks. Like mentally, he is a bit of a head case.
Yeah,
sure. He refused to do post-game interviews after last week. He's refused to interview this entire week. There was rumors about he was mad at Russell Wilson about Wilson saying that he didn't run a correct route in a game or something. He had one of the least his focus last week just seemed to be a bit off with all the drops and miscues that he had last week. So I always get a little worried with him, but I lean towards the over.
All right, leaning towards the over. That feels good for me. I played those. And Zach mentioning in the chat, are you going to factor in the likelihood of Pickens and Evans being ejected? Hey, it's a realistic problem.
I already dealt with it with Jawan Jennings last week, so I don't think I can handle another player ejection.
We got the good side of it earlier in the year on Puka Nacua. We got the bad side of it
That is true.
Later in the year on Jawan Johnson. Colt saying he's pulling an AB this week. A couple prop questions from the chat here. Nick Papagiorgio over on Twitter. Come join us on YouTube and hit that like button. It goes a long way for us here. He's asking about Freiermuth. It seems a little bit inflated. I assume he's talking about his receiving yards or his receptions. Receiving yards right now, 45.5, minus 114. Sorry, 41.5, excuse me, minus 114 both ways. And his receptions, 4.5 plus 112 towards the over. Are these too high now? Are you willing
I'd agree. I'd agree. I think slightly inflated off the last 2 weeks also. I would agree with that.
Okay. Hitman agrees with that. Nick Papagiorgio. Hopefully I didn't butcher your name. 17 Cali has 2 questions here. Number 1, Isaiah Likely over receiving yards and alt overs are the best look of this whole week in his opinion. Right now, Likely's at 20.5 minus 114. I think you talked about this yesterday or it might have been Sumo with the personnel that they're playing. Probably going to see a lot more 12 personnel without Zay Flowers. Do you like this play of Isaiah Likely overs and potentially some alts?
It was me that was talking about it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would lean towards Likely overs as well.
All right.
I haven't bet it yet, but I definitely lean that way. Sometimes Baltimore is tough because they get in so many game scripts sometimes where they have so little pass volume and you could just absolutely get sunk on some of these guys. But I do think that the tight ends are the biggest beneficiaries to this injury of Flowers.
All right. A ton of questions here for this game. So we're going to go through rapid fire. Quickly, not sure if Hitman does defensive props. Roquan Smith overs seem good for me.
Sorry, I don't. I do defensive props, but I do not originate them, so I can't give a good opinion.
All right. All right. Let's move on to Kyle Lamb, who's asking about Warren under 8.5 rush attempts minus 120. That's actually a good reminder quickly, man, before you jump in. If you guys are going to ask questions for plays, it helps me out a ton if you attach the price to it.
Force play. I would kind of directionally lean Warren overs as he's been the more effective back over Najee Harris, but Pittsburgh is tricky with their running back usage. Arthur Smith with personnel usage is very tricky.
All right. And then I guess you already answered Jason's question here. Warren over on receiving yards. It's 21.5 minus 113. I assume you're leaning
I don't think Cordero Patterson's going to be playing. So I know he played last week. I think maybe some of that was Warren coming in with on the injury report that week, and it wasn't a must-win game, just a game that they wanted to win. So I don't think we see much Patterson.
All right, last thing here before we move on to the next game is Bateman adjusted for no Zay enough from Dealey 23, 46.5 minus.
Yeah, I think it's adjusted enough.
All right, correctly adjusted there. All right, let's move on to our next game. Denver Broncos taking on the Buffalo Bills Sunday afternoon game. And hey, man, I had a fun one here. I wasn't really sure what prop we should talk about, but I want to take a look at the market, and it's the most rushing yards in the game. Now, hear me out. I'm going to try and sell you on this bet I made here. So, first of all, both of these teams like to rotate their running backs heavily. They both use 3 running backs throughout the entire season. And I really think with the spread right now being at 8.5, we could be in a game script where the Bills are up multiple scores and they kind of choose to rotate James Cook in and out. Johnson plays, Davis plays. And that, to me, screams like the perfect script for a big, heavy pass script for the Broncos. But when we've seen Bo Nix willing to drop his eyes and run. So if we head over to the most rushing yards market right now on FanDuel, Bo Nix is priced at 10-1 to lead the game in rushing yards. I bet it a little bit. It's 11-1 now. I mean, hey, I'll take the better price. I'll take the better price.
Moving the opposite way on your plays is what you're saying.
Market influence, as I like to say. But yeah, 11-1 here. I mean, taking a look at these names, what are your thoughts on that?
I think that if you are looking for a game to maybe attack some of these long shot prices, this is a good game because Denver is very much a hot hand type running game where if one guy gets it going, they might go with them. It could be any one of the 3 running backs, theoretically, that if they have they get them all involved early. And if one of them gets then it could be one of them. And Buffalo, they've been using now. I think maybe it changes a little bit during the playoffs that it's more James Cook than we've seen in recent weeks, but they've been willing to use other running backs a lot also. And both quarterbacks have shown that they have a little bit of a ceiling running the ball sometimes. I don't know specifically about the next one, but I do think that it's the best game that if you are going to look at some longer shots, that would be the game.
All right, quickly here, a couple questions about Javonte Williams and Mims. Does Mims get a jet sweep attempt over 0.5 rushing yards at 0.5 rushing attempts at minus 115?
It's so that type of bet is very hard to predict, but I'd kind of lean towards yes, just subjectively thinking about it. I mean, it's a guy that they've obviously made more of an effort to get involved in the offense. So don't hate it.
All right. And then from Zach here, before we move on to our next game, Javonte Williams over receiving props if they're going to be in more passing downs. It's minus 14.5 minus 113.
I kind of lean that way because I do think this is a game script that could get away from Denver a little bit. And if that does happen, Javonte Williams is their most trusted pass protector out of the 3 running backs. So don't hate it. Don't hate the look.
All right. And then last question from Jason. He's painted a little script for us here. Allen over 7.5 rush attempts at minus 108. A couple rushes in the first half to build a lead and then kneel it out at the end.
Usually I do directionally look towards the quarterback rushing stuff over, but I just have a little bit of concerns about the game script in this one, which I know you're talking about. They can kneel it out at the end. I know Buffalo now don't quote me on this. I'm just going off memory, but they are a team that a lot of times will put Trubisky in for the kneels.
I was going to say
now, like if they're up 7 or something and kneeling at the end, like I'm almost positive it'll be Josh Allen. But some teams sometimes will like keep their starting quarterback in up 14 and he'll do the kneels. And then other teams maybe sub somebody out. If memory serves me correct, I think the Buffalo is a team that more will sub Allen out for those. I know Trubisky had negative rushing yards on the year. Now, a lot of that is because the only time he does play is when he's getting those kneels. But yeah, I'm not sure on the rush attempts.
All right, quickly, yes or no here. Kincaid over 33.5 minus 115.
I really don't have an opinion.
Okay, all right, let's move on to our next game then. Green Bay Packers taking on the Philadelphia Eagles. And normally we like uncertainty here on Forward Progress. It creates room for us to attack. But I feel like there's almost too much uncertainty. We know these quarterbacks are going to play. We don't know to what capacity they're going to be injured. Right now, Jalen Hurts dealing with a concussion. Jordan Love dealing with some elbow pain. Rob mentioned this on the show previously. He mentioned Jordan Love potentially under 35.5 longest completion. If you can might want to take a look at that towards the under if his elbow is injured. But this is more so some game that you'd probably want to monitor live. One thing I'm going to be looking at is Jalen Hurts' usage in the run game. If they're going to be willing to throw him out there for some tush pushes with in these short yardage situations, they have Saquon Barkley. Are they willing to risk him getting another concussion? What are some live looks you're going to be looking for in this game? Or do you have any opinion about these quarterbacks that now that they're both injured coming into this game?
Yeah, to be honest, I really don't think the injuries haven't been a big part of my handicapping on this game. If anything, I'm more concerned about Jordan Love with a throwing elbow than I am with the Jalen Hurts stuff. I think Hurts is going to be fine. Like I know there were some other shows that were talking about like, oh, will they run the tush push with Jalen Hurts because he's coming off a concussion? Yeah, they're running it. Like I'm pretty confident in saying that. So I'm really not concerned with the Eagles stuff, even in the live betting. I think it's just not that much of a big of a deal. The Green Bay stuff I'd say has more looks that I'd be looking at more. It really comes down to if Jordan Love looks like they're doing work on his elbow on the sideline. He looks inaccurate with some of his throws. Then I think maybe you can look in the prop market, betting some receivers unders, some quarterback unders, or you could just look at the full game live market, which is going to probably have really good limits, and look at maybe betting some Philly or some under. There's a lot of ways you could attack it, but I'll be more looking for Jordan Love stuff than I will Jalen Hurts stuff.
All right. I don't know if he'll be able to answer this for Steven Robinson, but he's going to the Eagles-Packers game. Anytime touchdown bet you like? I know you don't want to bet the touchdown market, but do you have anything that would come?
Eagles only, anytime touchdown. You know what the issue is, Steven? It's just that the Eagles are such a condensed offense where it's just the guys that get the ball are their star players. Like no role players really get the ball for Philadelphia. So I honestly wish I could help you, even just to give you a forced play, but I can't even think of many under the radar guys, because with Philly, it's just their main guys get the ball and nobody else really gets it for them.
All right. I'll give one. I don't know if Steven wants to hear it from me, but I would take Kenneth Gainwell plus 950. I feel like that's a long shot enough where it could be.
If you're going to do Kenneth Gainwell, do it for the last touchdown. I'd say that's what I would say.
It's just 27-1. It feels a little too adjusted for me. I don't know. I think I would just rather take his anytime, but
I'd probably say that the Eagles are the easiest offense to price on anytime touchdowns. Just thinking off my head, top of my head, there's no offense I think has less variance on their anytime touchdown market.
17 Cali saying, don't you slander Grant Calcaterra. All right. I will try not to. Quickly, before we head into the next game, Kraft 36.5 receiving yards, minus 113. Eagles struggle versus tight ends. It seems like Packers need to get it out quickly. I assume he's talking about the over here.
Yeah, I know Dan mentioned to me this play earlier. I don't have much of an opinion on it, to be honest. I know there was some talk about, does Luke Musgrave take any of his snaps now that he's more back into the fold? He's been active now for, I believe, 3-4 weeks. Probably not. But yeah, I don't got much of an opinion on it.
All right, let's go rapid fire for these last two games. Washington Commanders taking on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I was going to ask you about the running back situation, but we already got some questions in the chat, so we'll just fire these away. Cole in the chat is asking Brian Robinson under rushing plus receiving yards, 57.5 minus 113. You talked a little bit about it on the previous show. Are you still feeling the same way? Lean towards the under here?
Lean towards the under. There's been a little bit of coach speak about getting Robinson involved more and everything, but I just think that logically Austin Eckler is the better fit in this game from a matchup standpoint. Now, sometimes coaches don't think logically on some of this stuff, but I would think that Eckler is the more game plan specific, better guy. So I would lean towards that.
All right. Question from Jason here. Baker over 3.5 rush attempts minus 138. Said seems like a lock. What are your thoughts on that?
Not really a market that I dip into much, just because the liquidity on rush attempts tends to be a harder to get money down than it is the rush yards. But I guess it does go with the quarterback rushing angle. And I know that Baker Mayfield hasn't really been he hasn't been inflated much on his rush yards like some other quarterbacks have been this week. So that's
all
it
right.
on me.
From one quarterback to another, we have two questions for Jaden Daniels, both towards the over. His 8.5 rush attempts at minus 114 and his over 49.5 rushing yards at minus 115. If you had to pick one between the two, which would you prefer?
Kind of like both.
All right. Love it. Love it. All right. Let's get into our last game here. Then there's a couple holistic questions in the chat that I want to get to. Minnesota Vikings taking on the Los Angeles Rams. The main question I have for you here is what the hell's going on with Cooper Kupp? 9 targets in the last 3 games. Is he hurt? Is he injured? What's going on here? They're going to be facing a very blitz happy Minnesota Vikings team. Are they going to be trying to get the ball out quick? And does that scream Cooper Kupp over receptions, or is he going to get targeted a lot, or is it that ball still going to go to Nakua like we've been seeing the last couple of weeks?
I think that a lot of the Rams receiver stuff has just been lowered because they've been in a lot of game scripts where they haven't had to throw or been playing in monsoons in San Francisco. There's been a lot of kind of fluky game stuff that's led to that. So subjectively, I kind of lean towards overs with some of the Rams receivers. Kupp, I get worried with him because like there was some rumors from some pretty sharp people like talking about last year that he was going to retire, and because of something with some of the lower body injuries that he's had. And I just wonder if he is. I kind of get scared with him that he is maybe getting to the end of the road, and it is just his body's kind of breaking down on him. So that's the concern that I have. Like I mentioned, subjectively, I have felt like a lot of these Rams guys are low just because of the crazy game scripts they've gotten into.
Yeah, and I was also looking at some first read target stuff. I probably should have looked later on in the year compared to the beginning of the year. But a lot of the times it seems like Nakua is getting more of those first read targets where he's actually getting thrown the ball on the first read compared to Cooper Kupp, which doesn't seem like the Cooper Kupp we kind of know who that creates separation really quickly off the line of scrimmage. But anyways, that does it for us for the games. Couple questions I want to get around to that were mentioned. Here it is. Allen, Lamar, Herbert, Daniel, all over their rushing yards. But wait, there was another question which kind of goes the other way. QB rushing yards reached the undervalue. I just want to get your quick thoughts on, like, we talked a little bit about this yesterday, the quarterback rushing situation, how quarterbacks tend to run the ball a little bit more in these more important need to win games. Have you felt we've reached that tipping point yet on some guys? Is it price dependent per guy? What are your just general thoughts on this?
It's just based on an individual basis. If I think that somebody's adjusted enough, I kind of like the Daniels one that Colt mentioned on the over. If I had to think of a guy that's maybe over adjusted right now, I'd probably say Josh Allen's getting a little high right now, I'd say. But it's really just a case-by-case basis on a lot of these guys.
All right, fair enough. Last thing I want to get around to before
I know real quick too, with Lamar Jackson, he has ran a lot in playoff games in his during his career, like way more than the regular season. So normally I'd probably say that he wasn't adjusted enough, but it's just the Pittsburgh, how good of a job they've done at not letting him run in their past matchups that kind of keeps me off that. But Lamar is a guy initially that I was targeting.
Okay. Before we head out, I asked you a quick question about this. It's just the most rushing, most receiving, most passing yards in the wild card round. I asked you about this in the playoffs, but are there any props in here that you like?
Go to the show all on most rush yards.
So I was looking at a lot of the quarterbacks. We got like 42-1 this is to get the most rushing yards in the wild card round. 42-1 for Jane Daniels, 47-1 for Lamar Jackson, 75-1 for Josh Allen. All these quarterbacks feel like they're priced relatively high when I could see that there's a path for them to potentially win this week.
I don't love it. I don't love it with the quarterbacks just because, I mean, there's so much competition with Derrick Henry and Saquon Barkley. Like, you're going to have to get one of these quarterbacks with those guys lined at 100 yards. Mm-hmm. You're going to have to get one of these quarterbacks in like the 125 range, I feel like, just to have a chance. And that's a tough one. I see most rush yards, Bucky Irving. I did play that, but that was a different number. At current market, probably Aaron Jones, 22-1 would be the one that I think would stand out of all those. Just that Minnesota was using Jones as a workhorse like early in the year. They kind of backed off of it a little bit. As the season was going on, he was getting nicked up a little bit, but he has been a guy that's been super efficient throughout his career. It's just about him getting banged up. But now that it's the playoffs, I could see them kind of unleashing him. So Aaron Jones, 22-1 would be a forced play of mine on that I do not dislike.
Sounds good. And I got to reach out to Fanduel to get Bo Nix up in this market so I can play him at like 125-1 or whatever he's going to be posted at. That does it for us here today, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in. We really appreciate it. Before you head out here, do us a huge favor. Smash that like button. Goes a long way for us in the algorithm. And if you're new to the channel, hit that subscribe button as well. We've got tons of great content coming your way. Tomorrow morning, reminder, Saturday morning, not Sunday morning. We're moving the pizza buffet from Sunday to Saturday so we can cover every single game. Rob will be live at 11 a.m. Eastern time. Saturday morning, guys. Saturday morning, new time. So make sure you're here for that. It's a great way to get your weekend started. Then obviously we have our Saturday night watch along, Sunday night watch along, and Monday night watch along. So guys, make sure you tune in for those. We have a great time. I believe Hitman's going to be joining us for some of these watch alongs. So if you want some more live bets, that's the place to be. So anyways, guys, before you head out, one more time, I'm going to ask you, smash that like button. If you're on Twitter, come over to YouTube, subscribe. We just passed 8,000 subscribers. We really appreciate it. Let's get a little bit more. Try and get to 9,000 before the end of the playoffs. But yeah, that just about does it for us today. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. We'll see you in the next one.